And welcome to the Citizen Report. I'm Jonathan Shannon, and thank you for joining us. This newscast is real, in-depth, American. David Heller has this episode off, and thank you so much for joining us. I should tell you right up front that I am recovering from a pretty modest head cold, so my voice is going to sound a little different, and unfortunately my skills for this podcast aren't quite as up to par, but I've put this podcast off enough days and I'm just ready to get back into it. So hope you hang in there with me, and I appreciate it as I tried to do this podcast despite me still recovering from this cold. But I just want to tell you up front that this topic that I'm fixing to get into could be the most disturbing, or it's maybe the single most disturbing topic that I've ever done on this podcast to date. And I just want to tell you up front that viewer discretion is advised, because some of the details that I'm about to get into, which I'm about to explain, could be pretty disturbing. I certainly do not want any children who might be listening to this part of the podcast this time. And if you want to go ahead and skip ahead to the headlines, I will try to remember to put in the timestamp for that in the description, so you can just skip ahead to that, and I perfectly understand. Let me go ahead and tell you what this topic is about. It's come to my attention that there has been an anonymous post made regarding the Wuhan coronavirus, or so-called coronavirus. I cannot independently confirm this. It may be all fiction, or it may be all true, or somewhere in the middle. I suspect, if I had to put my money to it, it would probably be somewhere in between. However, I've contemplated how I would approach this, and I've decided what I would do is I'd pick out excerpts of this writing, and I would just read it to you. Now, I was not the one given this information. I saw it from somebody I was paying attention to on Facebook, shared the link to this, and I've gone over this, and I've picked out some excerpts, and what this is about is this is supposedly, allegedly, somebody inside the Chinese government who is alleging that this coronavirus is actually a bioweapon, if that's the correct term, bioweapon, and it was not meant to be released, but nevertheless it was, that kind of deal. And I want to say one more time that this is extremely, at times, graphic. I tried to pick out kind of in a way that could summarize this, in terms of at least giving you a picture or an idea of what this person is alleging. I think I've excluded the most graphic details. However, there are some details I left in there because I felt like that if I'm going to cover this, I needed to still include a number of details that are graphic. So I just want to say one more time, and I know I'm kind of holding out before I get going with this. I just want to tell you again, viewer discretion is advised. Please do not listen to this portion of the podcast if you doubt in any way that you're able to handle disturbing information. And I just want to say, as a Christian, we should not be fearful in any way. So if you are a Christian listening to this podcast, just don't let this get to you in any way, because God's our protector anyway. So with that said, viewer discretion is advised, and let's get going with this. And again, I'm trying to do my best with my voice. I know my voice is not that great today, but I'm trying to still do this podcast today. So here we go. This writing, and I'm gonna, as I said, this is not the entirety of it. There's far more to it, but I'm gonna include excerpts. But this is how it starts, or I think this is about how it starts. Quote: I am a Chinese citizen in Wuhan who occupies, or perhaps occupied, a high-ranking position in military intelligence. I am also a member of the Chinese Communist Party. As a senior official near the top of the party, I have access to a great deal of classified information, and I have been involved in many top-secret government projects. I have a doctorate from a leading university in a Western country, which is why I'm able to write my account in English. I have information that I believe could lead to the overthrow of my government, I have information that I believe could lead to the overthrow of my government, and of course I'll add the context to it. Obviously, he's referring to the Chinese government. It continues. It is also relevant to billions of people outside of China, all of whom are now in existential peril. I probably mispronounced that word. And I just want to say, I do not believe this is actually a clear and present danger to the average person in America listening to this. I am not in any way fear-mongering. I don't myself. I'll just tell you myself, I'm personally not fearful in a major way. But I believe this information is, whether if it's true or not, before I continue, let me just say, whether if any of this is true or not, I believe it's better practice on my part to just pass this along to you and let you decide whether you think this is credible or not. But let me continue. Quote, by now you will be familiar with the recent outbreak of 2019 nCoV, also known as NCP, or simply coronavirus. You will have heard that it originated in Wuhan, an industrial city in China, and that it came from an animal, most likely a bat or a pangolin, that was sold in a wild animal market. You will have been told that it is an influenza-like illness that in severe cases can in severe cases cause pneumonia, respiratory failure, and death. Finally, you may have heard that although the disease is highly infectious, it is dangerous only to the elderly or to those who have a compromised immune system. The official lethality rate is approximately 2% or so. All of that is a bunch of lies concocted by the Chinese state with the tacit support of the U.S. deep state and its friends in the European Union, Russia, and Australia, and spread by the docile media in all of those countries. And again, I'm not reading all this. I've just copy-pasted excerpts in a Word document. So moving on to the next excerpt. Naturally, as Hong Kong is one of the most open and international cities in the world, the party decided that it was too risky to release the agent in Hong Kong without first testing it. For this, it needed a great number of human guinea pigs. 2 groups were identified for this. And again, next excerpt. Quote, by then, our president, and in context, he's referring to the Chinese president, Xi Jinping. Quote, by then, our president had already introduced a social credit system that allowed us to identify disloyal, counter-revolutionary, and bourgeois elements in our society. Using the social credit scores, which are taken from online activity, electronic shopping behavior, and reports from informers and civil society, we selected some of the worst offenders. Next excerpt. Unfortunately, it quickly became apparent that the agent also had other effects. About 1 week after the retardation set in, our subjects developed major anxieties and panic attacks. Eventually, they developed symptoms akin to those of paranoid schizophrenics. At that point, their bodies rapidly deteriorated. They developed massive internal bleeding. The walls of their arteries dissolved. They bled out of their eyes. And I'm not going to actually read the rest of that sentence because I realize that's a very disturbing statement. But you get the gist of it. Next excerpt. To put it in a more direct Western manner, they started to melt. Yes, I know, folks, that's pretty disturbing stuff. But as Christians, we should not allow that to cause fear. I'm not letting it cause fear in myself. I'd rather know what's going on with the deep state in these various countries, especially China. But just know there's no reason to feel fear. Let me continue with my next excerpt. Death usually occurred through multiple organ failure. This was preceded by at least 5 days of severe agony, which could not be alleviated by painkillers. It was at this time that I first violated our protocol. One subject, an elderly lady who had published defamatory cartoons of our president, and again, in context, he's referring to the Chinese president. Actually, again, as I read this, there's some things I think I can leave out without saying it. Let's just say she preferred death over living, and he, without saying how he did it, he obliged, okay? You get the idea. Next excerpt. We decided that our agent was unusable. It was far too destructive for our purposes. We wanted the population of Hong Kong to submit to us. We did not want to exterminate it. So let me just stop right there and say this before I continue. What's becoming clear is that the Chinese want to control Hong Kong. If you remember, folks, if you've been alive long enough, I was born in 96. A lot of you may have been born before that, and some of you probably were born later. But I'm just saying, in 97, Britain gave back Hong Kong to China. But it was stipulated that they were supposed to keep this separate system. That basically, yes, Hong Kong is ultimately part of China, but they're a distinct political entity, a distinct political district or region, and they're not supposed to be merged into China. So the fact that China is trying to basically control the Hong Kong citizens in a way that that's obviously counter to that is definitely disturbing. Of course, it's disturbing enough to even have this regime in China to begin with, that being the communist regime. But I think that right there is a pretty indicative statement. That I'm going to read that sentence again. We wanted the population of Hong Kong to submit to us. We did not want to exterminate it. Let me continue on with this excerpt. Naturally, our American friends had by then taken an interest in our work and asked us for a sample for their own research and testing purposes. They hinted that they wished to use it to resolve certain difficulties in Venezuela. Normally, we would have agreed, as we maintained friendly relations with the CIA. But given the extremely toxic nature of the agent, we declined. And let me just stop again and say that obviously what this says right here is that this is one deep state talking about another deep state. This is what basically chalks up to being a defector of the Chinese deep state, talking about how our deep state, as in CIA, this is to say, whenever you talk about the government here, that's to say deep state. That's not the government, the legitimate government at large. This is talking about the deep state. This is why that President Trump, this is why that so many of us out there, average American citizens, talk about drain the swamp, because we have a swamp here. And this is obviously what he's talking about. There's a swamp in Washington, in DC, and he's talking about here the CIA. But let me continue. This, as it turned out, was a grave mistake. The CIA was convinced that we had developed something very powerful and wanted to keep it to ourselves. They offered a great deal of money to one of our researchers. Foolishly, he agreed to sell them a specimen. We found out just in time for the handover and tried to stop it from happening. In the ensuing shootout, don't bother to look for it in the news. It was never reported anywhere. Several dozen people were killed. More importantly, however, the agent escaped. Let me skip down here to the next excerpt. Once we realized that the agent had escaped and would start to spread, we swiftly put all of Wuhan into lockdown. I was one of those tasked to manage the fallout of the contamination. Of course, we could not keep such a huge undertaking secret, so we decided to order our state media to report that a coronavirus had broken out in Wuhan. In reality, of course, there was no coronavirus. It was all made up. It was one of my colleagues who came up with the genius idea of pretending that people with the common flu suffered from the coronavirus. This allowed us to hide the true nature of the disease. Let me explain. It is currently flu season in China. Once we realized that we could no longer control the spread of the agent, we sent our men to all the hospitals and instructed all doctors to diagnose every case of the common flu as coronavirus. We came up with a new name, 2019 NCOV, and handed out, quote, fact sheets, unquote, that described a made-up illness. I understand, and this is the next excerpt, by the way. I understand that what I just said is difficult to believe because you have been told that there have been only about 50,000 infections and far fewer deaths. But these are the influenza infections that have been falsely passed off as the non-existent coronavirus. The agent is far, far more contagious than that, and its fatality rate, unlike the coronavirus, is not 2%. No, its fatality rate is 100%. Nobody recovers from it. Everybody who contracts it dies. And a lot of people are contracting it. Next excerpt. I am part of the greatest cover-up in human history, the hiding of the deaths of tens of millions. Very soon, Hebei province will be no more than a giant mortuary, and the truth will come out. Okay, so that's the end of all the excerpts here. And to give you my personal thoughts about this, and folks, I'm bringing this up, I do not presume this as fact. However, I felt that it was important that I at least tell you what's being claimed by somebody, by some anonymous person that wrote this writing. Whether or not this is true or not, you're welcome to think what you want. Personally, I tend to think that about 50% of it seems to be plausible. I don't think I believe that it's 100% deadly, because we do hear these cases where even Americans are contracting this quote-unquote coronavirus, and yet they seem to, at least I have not heard that they're always deadly. You know, it seems like that people do seem to pull out of it, you know, in certain cases. I don't want to say that, I don't want to fearmonger. I am personally not fearful of it at all, and you shouldn't be either. You know, I'm personally not concerned about it on a major level at all. And as Christians, we shouldn't be worried about it anyway. And I didn't want to end this segment without giving you some hope, you know, some actual substantial hope. And I thought a good way to do that would be to bring up Psalms 91. And I just want to encourage you, if you're a Christian, that, you know, God's hand of protection is upon you. And you do, you know, just trust God to protect you. And I believe that God will protect those who belong to Him. Obviously, let me just say this before I get to Psalms 91. We don't want to do stupid stuff where we deliberately put ourselves at risk, because, you know, you don't want to make the angels work overtime, right? But I'm just saying that if you belong to Jesus, if you're a Christian, that you can trust God and He'll protect you. You know, there's no reason to fear this kind of stuff. We know that in the end times, that there will be diseases, wars, rumors of wars. You know, there are things that are happening. Like, what was it that was going on? Africa or something? I'm not sure. If somebody's listening and if y'all want to chime in and say what it was exactly. There was something about, I'm not sure if it was a locust outbreak or something, but some kind of insect outbreak. It was nuts. It was nuts. Just absolutely nuts that you had all these insects just absolutely, it was absolutely biblical. And, it just stands to reason again that, whether the excerpts I just read to you from that anonymous poster is true or not, I think it's safe to say we are well into the end times here. And as Christians, we should never fear. We just trust God and He'll protect us. But I wanted to read to you, I'm not sure if I'll read all of it, but I wanted to read to you Psalms 91. I'm going to start, and this is Psalms chapter 91. I'm going to start in verse 1 here. Quote, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." Verse 2, "I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him I will trust." So that right there, the introduction, as I might call it, to Psalms 91, because we belong to God, we're Christians, we are grafted in to the body of Christ. We belong to Jesus. We're Christians. Jesus has come. He paid the debt in full on the cross, and He rose again on the third day. We as Christians, we belong to Jesus. We can just say ourselves, as it says in Psalms 91, "He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him I will trust." And I just wanted to encourage you that you can actually literally, just say, "I trust you, God. You are my refuge and my fortress. In you, God, I will trust. I'm not going to live in fear. I'm going to trust that my Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus, being indwelt with the Holy Spirit, that I'm going to be protected. I'm provided for. I am safe. I am so safe that it's like Jesus Himself literally, like a disciple. It's like the disciples, they got fearful when they saw these storms happening, and they were in the boat and Jesus was sleeping, and yet they were just getting fearful and all this stuff. And if you've read the Bible, you would know that there was no reason for them to be living in fear. And there's no reason to live in fear despite what may be happening around the world. Let me continue though. "Surely He will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. He shall cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. You shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor of the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor of the destruction that lays waste at noonday." Now, this is my favorite. This is one of my favorite parts of this whole chapter right here. "1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand." So, what does that say? I mean, I'm not a Bible theologian, but to me, that sure sounds like that. Yes, you could even have people, like if you're out in public, you could literally have people close to you, up to the point of being at your right hand, falling over for whatever reason. I'm not saying literally falling over. Obviously, the picture that comes to my mind personally is a war zone, that kind of thing. But, to put it in more modern terms, let's say that if you're out in public and there's people infected, but, with a deadly disease, but you're safe, because God's protecting you. So 1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. Only with your eyes shall you look and see the reward of the wicked. And I think right there is another good picture that we, as Christians, we don't get what we deserve. We deserve punishment, but instead we get mercy, and we are just showered with that mercy and showered with that grace. And I think that that's another picture, as so many times in the Bible, where we get these glimpses, these of that reality that, we only look with our eyes and see the reward of the wicked, because we ourselves, we belong to Christ. We don't have to fear, we can be at perfect peace. But continuing on here in Psalms 91, "Because you have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place. No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over you, to keep you in all your ways. In their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. You shall tread upon the lion and the cobra, the young lion and the serpent you shall trample underfoot. And then here's the final section of Psalm 91. Because he has set his love upon me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him on high, because he has known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. So that concludes Psalms 91. I hope that was an encouragement to you, whether or not you actually listened to the part about coronavirus. I hope that was encouraging to you. Certainly, just me reading it was encouraging to me personally. So I hope that it was, like I said, I hope it was encouraging to you, and I hope you appreciated that. But let's get into some headlines here before I wrap up this edition of the Citizen Report. And these headlines are from johnbwellsnews.com. I don't get any kind of commission from talking about this or mentioning the website. I just believe I just believe that this is a good product. I believe that it's a well put together website. I certainly appreciate it because, look, I'm tired of the Drudge Report kind of appearing to list to the left. I'm not sure if that is actually his intent, but at the Drudge Report. But I appreciate somebody like John B. Wells who does these headlines, and you can actually get the full picture. And so again, johnbwellsnews.com. I don't get any kind of commission for saying that, but I just think this is a good product. I use it myself. So first headline from Judicial Watch. Tom Fitton, AG, as in Attorney General, should freeze Flynn investigation amid potentially corrupt DOJ, as in Department of Justice, prosecution. From the Gateway Pundit, developing. Durham expands probe into special counsel's activities, interviews several FBI investigators who worked on Mueller's team. From Washington Examiner, Massachusetts Democrat who sits on ethics panel arrested for corruption. From LouRockwell.com, they are coming to take you away. Ha ha ho ho. Okay, not quite sure. I'd have to read that one to see what they're talking about on that particular headline. Next one from PaulCraigRoberts.org. Will censorship prevail over the First Amendment? From Bearing Arms. UConn, and I think that's referring to University of Connecticut, hosts Second Amendment panel with no Second Amendment advocates. See, that's the whole thing. This whole thing, the mainstream, whatever, they want to represent themselves as fair, and yet when it gets right down to it, they're not. They claim to be unbiased when they're not. It's just, and I don't know about that case if they were claiming to be unbiased. I'm just saying that, it's just incredible to me to watch these liberals, these leftists, conduct themselves that way, where they don't even want to acknowledge the legitimacy of, those of us who believe in, who want the Second Amendment as written. Continuing on here from AmericanThinker.com, Barack Obama, a traitor for the ages. From JohnPilger.com, Julian Assange must be freed, not betrayed. A few more headlines here. Boom. The IRS is suing Facebook for $9 billion. Wow. From, let's see. Continuing on here. I'm still on johnbwellsnews.com. Oregon residents petition to join Idaho due to frustrating liberal policies. And so, I think that's great. I think that the conservative parts of Oregon should go. I personally wouldn't mind seeing them just become a new state in general. But, next best thing, of course, is joining a state that more aligns with what they want, in that case being Idaho. I've never personally been to Idaho, but it sounds like a great state. And and I say good for them, more power to them, and I hope they get their way if they are not able to resolve it through their own state government, their current state government being, of course, Oregon. A few more headlines here. Gordon Chang warning America about Chinese Huawei tech embedded in 5G network to surveil Americans. DOJ is investigating if Obama officials hid evidence in Russia election interference. Well, of course they did. Of course they did. I mean, that's an established fact. I think, it's just... I just think that all truth will be revealed, and I think we're seeing that now with the Obama administration. Touting the single life, CNN promotes the death of the West. Compliance 101, gun-toting cops endanger students and turn the schools into prisons by John W. Whitehead. Clinton-appointed federal judge resigns for behaving in office like Bill Clinton. Looks like after an unconstitutional bump stock ban, the ATF might be pushing for a national gun registry. Well, to that, I just say no and hell no. We're not participating in that. Next headline. Wuhan 400. Novel predicted coronavirus 40 years ago. Internet stumped. I heard of that just last night. I was listening to John B. Wells on his Caravan to Midnight news segment last night. And I'm not sure which night I was listening. Not sure which episode I was listening to. And actually, because I'm still recovering from my sickness, I'm not even sure if I'm not even sure if I heard that last night, but I certainly remember hearing John B. Wells talking about it, where it was literally mentioned in a book from decades back. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and click on, in fact, I've already clicked on this article here just now, and apparently it's from a book called, written by Dean Koontz, Koontz, and the title of the book is called The Eyes of Darkness. And I know that it mentions something what purports to be the same thing as the coronavirus. I just think that's incredible. Wow. I may have to take a look at that at some point. Let's get to more of these headlines before we wrap up here. Expert warns quarantine process failed as China stands ready to crash world economy. China is being accused of mistreating coronavirus nurses for propaganda. The coronavirus 5G connection and cover-up. Hiding the outbreak. Florida conceals number of people tested for coronavirus, then stupidly lies about the reason why, by Mike Adams. A couple more here. 10 very important questions that the mainstream media should be asking about this coronavirus outbreak by Michael Snyder. Next headline. Iran confirms first 2 cases of COVID-19. Diamond Princess confirms 79 more cases as quarantine ends. All right, so I think that wraps up our headlines here. But again, just to wrap this up, let me just say that I think that we should never be living in fear at all, and I think that as Christians we should not be living in fear anyway. We all aren't perfect at it, obviously, but I think that as Christians we can just be, we can receive that, we can hear information. These headlines and such, these, news topics without getting in fear. There's no reason to live in fear because God's protecting us. So with that note, I just want to thank you again for hanging in there with me. And, despite me recovering from my cold, I hope you guys appreciated this episode of the Citizen Report. I always appreciate your feedback. And of course, don't forget our website as well, thecitizenreport.weebly.com. And on that note, I will go ahead and close out the Citizen Report. I'm Jonathan Shannon, and thank you for tuning in, as always, to the Citizen Report, where we're always real, in-depth American. And we appreciate you joining us, and have a great rest of your night. And for David Heller and myself, Jonathan Shannon, thank you for joining us for the Citizen Report. And, of course, David Heller is away, and hopefully he can be back on the air soon. And I hope you have a good rest of your night, and I hope you join us next time for the Citizen Report. Have a great evening, everybody.
The Citizen Report is a production of New Shannon Media. All content protected under copyright.